How is everyone? I'm seeing some thumbs up. Give me just a moment, letting a few more folks in. There we go. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming. We have a lighter crowd today, which I think is probably to be expected, given that the topic was a little nondescript. Our hope is that we start getting a little bit in the way of crowdsourced content, or said in a less annoying way, just some user participation. So Camille's come up with a great list of conversation starters, and what we'd like to have happen is just get everybody's input on what you're seeing now, what's working, what's not, where we might need to focus some time, any topics we need to visit, those types of things. Camille, how did I do there? Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it'd be great to just open it up to see if anybody has any questions they'd like to pose to the group, and maybe we can start that way. Kind of what you're dealing with right now, or if you have anything to share. That's really the purpose of today's meeting. So, anybody?
Given how small and intimate this is, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to chat. Oh, I saw Kathleen's hand go up.
We are opening on site September 1st, with about half of our enrollment, maybe less. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. We've told the parents everything they have to do, and we know everything we have to do. And so we'll see. We have 22-year-olds through 6th grade. And no online learning. So we had to make a decision. We could only do one or the other because we're small. So yeah. So if anyone's, yes.
I appreciate what you said. We are now toward the end of our 4th week open. We have done no online learning because we didn't want to do it. You may think you know everything that you need to do, but believe me, you don't. Because
speak to me.
Because be prepared. You will find daily that there are things that come up that you think, oh my gosh, why hadn't I thought of that, or why didn't we do that? So just prepare yourself. I wonder how any of us are maintaining our sanity, if you want to know what I think. And I know how. And I'll tell you, I know how. Because when things get really bad, all I have to do is look around at the children's faces. They are so incredibly happy to be here. We are giving them a gift that they would not have if they were still at home, or if we were trying to do things, in my opinion, if we were trying to do things over the computer.
Absolutely.
So that's my input for you. Good luck.
Thank you. Well, the hardest part for me is that I am in the at-risk category.
I am 70. I am also. I'm 72, and that is also a concern.
Right, but I'm not allowed to be on site.
Oh man.
So I'm trying to do all this remotely, and so it's at the top of the list of COVID-19 losses for me, not to be at school.
Yes,
but I'm invited to parent meetings, and also I'll stay connected remotely.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Kathleen, would you mind sharing where you're positioned geographically and how big your school is?
We are in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a little suburb called Wilton Manors, but it's considered Fort Lauderdale. And we have about under 50 children. And we have 1 young children's community, 2 primary, 1 lower elementary, and 1 upper elementary.
Same here.
So, and we're in a storefront building that, of course, was renovated, but it works really well for us because every classroom has an outside door to get in the classroom, which we've never used because they're fire doors. But in this case, they will work beautifully. So once the children are in their pod, they're there all day.
That's awesome.
So,
and Jen, can you give us the same rundown? Where are you positioned and how big are you?
We're in Michigan. We have our own building. Every room has an outside door. We have 1 elementary class that includes lower and upper elementary, 1 toddler class, 1 8I class, and 2 primary classes. We have, how many square feet in each classroom? We have 10,000.
Total 1,300 square feet in each class.
A total of about 1,300 square feet in each class. We have taken 15 children in our primary classrooms with our fingers crossed. We're doing a lot of outside. We've got tents, so we're doing a lot of outside time, except yesterday when it rained all day.
Oh.
But so far, knock on wood.
Can you say 1 or 2 of the things that you didn't expect?
Oh, there'll be the little things. We of course had everyone bring water bottles so that when they're outside, they have something to drink because we're not using fountains. And so we had a great plan for putting the water bottles in a big cooler to take them outside. And then it dawned on us that even though the adult was putting the water bottles in the cooler and the adult was taking the water bottles out of the cooler, when they're in the cooler, they're next to each other.
Yeah.
So we have to rework that. What are we going to do with that? The making sure that we kept distance when we're outside with small children and figuring that out as much as possible, because I don't think that that's possible to do constantly. So those were just little things like that. You turn around, and then there are the parents. There's the parent who doesn't like the fact that the adults are wearing masks, and she wants, because her child, of course, needs to have, her 3-year-old needs to have adults whose faces she can see. And then there's the parent who feels like everybody should have on a mask. And then there's the one who, we've shortened our hours. Can we, make them, increase them again? It's one thing after another. Do I sound frustrated about that? It's like, I feel like I am constantly being, I think I'm shorter than I was when it started because I'm constantly being pushed down,
Right. Maybe one thing, and we spelled it all out clearly, as I think you did, and that's what they signed up for. And so I'm just going back to what they signed up for, and that we don't have any wiggle room. This is the way it has to be. Now, my administrator and owner of the school bought clear masks for the staff that go here and, cover the nose, but at least the children can see their mouths.
No, because they will get moisture, and they can't, and they're very uncomfortable, and so it doesn't allow things to be seen. We've tried 2 or 3 of that kind. Another thing is staff. This keeping the staff in pods is very important, but if you have a staff member who can't sub for people in their particular classroom, and that we have one classroom with the adult, and we have 3 assistants in the room. 2 of them get sick, the other one can't stay. Mm-hmm. You can't bring someone from another room. That has been horrendous. It is hard.
Very hard.
And it is worth it, again, because the children are thriving. The children are, it's wonderful for the children.
On a soft note, actually, Jen, that speaks to 2 of the issues you brought up, the parents and potentially the staff. I'm really excited about the guest speaker we have next week. It's Tim Selden from the Montessori Foundation. And the topic that he's recommended is leading challenging group meetings with staff and parents when they're anxious or upset, which I think might be critically important at this juncture.
Yes.
So that'll be next Thursday, and hopefully we get some insight from Tim.
Wonderful.
And we've had a lot of really great input in the chat. Diane has mentioned that she's outside Albany, New York, and currently has the maximum allowed 42 children, even though her capacity is 72. Robin had an awesome idea, which is adding the state that we're in to our names when we register, so that everybody can see where we're from. Robin, thank you for that.
Good.
We can do that now.
Yeah, with some notes on how to do that, actually. I didn't even know that was possible. Very cool. Jennifer says, we're in Clarendon Hills, Illinois, western suburb of Chicago. We had 6 weeks of summer and are now in our 3rd week of school, all in person. So Jennifer, it sounds like you're not doing any distance learning either. which seems to be kind of the general theme. I'd be interested if everybody doesn't mind dropping in a chat. Let me know who is and who is not doing distance learning. I'd like to kind of get a sense as to where we are there. Jennifer currently has about 130 students, ages 15 months to 12 years, where their typical capacity is 250. So that's another interesting data point. Everybody seems to be operating at roughly 50 to 60% capacity. Everyone over the age of 2 has to wear a mask in Illinois, but the children are doing beautifully. That's really helpful for us. Jennifer, is anybody else dealing with that? Anybody else in locales where the children have to wear masks?
Oh, the primary, yeah.
Okay.
Primary
We're,
elementary. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Robin.
we are, it's not required in California, but we are having our 3 to 6 wear masks. And yeah, they're doing very well. It is more like a practical life activity of that practicing. And that's how I explain it to parents.
Are you getting any pushback from parents?
I have had some families, once they find out that we do have children wear masks, they don't seek enrollment with us.
Oh, wow. Okay. Has there been any narratives that you have found have been well received? Anybody that you've been able to turn around?
By explaining how it is for both the teacher safety and the child safety, because we are a Montessori school and sitting, we can't physical distance 100% of the time in the classroom. I mean, if your child needs a lesson, we're going to sit right next to them. And so for our health and also for the child's health, then having both of us wear the mask. And parents are very receptive to that usually, and explaining that, yeah, it's not perfect all the time, but the fact that we are trying and the children, they are trying it, it seems to work well.
And it sounds like you haven't had any issues with the children wearing masks at all. I don't think anybody has on this call, correct?
Qasim, this is Wally.
Wally, yes, sir.
Just want to mention in our case, our policy is that the toddlers they do not wear masks.
Right.
The primary children, we highly recommend, but it's not compulsory. For elementary, we require masks. But so far, most of our primary children have taken into masks, and they seem to be pretty comfortable with wearing masks at that age too. So it's working out fairly well. Haven't had a whole lot of pushback, except one situation where the parent got really upset in terms of our check-in procedure, you know, with the temperature and this and that. They felt that we're treating their healthy children like biohazards. And they just didn't like that idea and they just withdrew. So we have had one instance so far, but other than that, it's worked out well.
And Wally, will you share where you're positioned geographically and how big your school is?
We are in Alpharetta, Georgia, outside Atlanta, Georgia. We have 2 toddlers. We have 4 primary, 2 lower elementary, 1 upper elementary. And we are currently, like you said, Qasim, like many other schools, we are about 60% of our capacity. And we don't plan to increase that, because I think beyond that, it'll cause a lot of stress to our teachers. So we're respecting that. So we're not getting any new students. We're not marketing for any new students. We just basically are trying to manage the students we have. And in our classes, especially primary and elementary, our maximum limit that we have placed on our classroom is about 18 children. We would not have more than 18 children. Our normal enrollment in each classroom is 28.
That's really helpful, Wally. Thank you for that. I've got quite a bit in the chat. Dolores mentioned that she's in Houston, Texas. She's been open since June 15th, so quite some time, with up to 12 children per classroom. At the moment, we only have 30 children. We have 3 primary classrooms and 1 toddler community. Our capacity is 90. So Dolores, y'all are running really light, it sounds like. Any learning lessons you want to share? Anything that, I mean, you've been open longer than most.
Well, yes, it started slow. We kind of did we usually are open for summers, but we just decided to, instead of just do it as more of a summer session, we would just start as a school, regular school. And it started out with very few children and one class actually, and then the toddler environment, and which was nice because we could test the protocol and see how everything worked. And then in August, everyone kind of else joined on board. We still have a few students who are not comfortable coming in person. So I do have a little bit of this hybrid there. When we were off, we did the work pickup, so the children would pick up work at school. So I'm still doing that with a few of the students who are not comfortable being in person at the school. But we do not have 12 children at the moment per class because we do have the toddlers. So one class has like 8, we want them to be in with their teachers and their cohorts. So I think we have one class with 4 children only. Mine at the moment has 10, but we think that's the best so that we can keep them, in their own cohorts and separated. And we haven't had any issues. We did, like Wally was saying, one of the parent was very against them wearing masks. I do ask that if my children want to work together, they wear a mask, but they're not wearing a mask all the time. And our classrooms are like 1,200 square feet. So there's plenty of space and everybody has their own table and we do a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of work outside.
And are you kind of aligned with Wally in that you're not looking to bring on any more students, just sort of sticking with what you have?
No, we would like, I think 12 students per class would be great. Like I said, we have one with 4. So that would be great to have. And the toddler community right now has 6 children. So we do have a new building that's opening up in September, like within the next couple of weeks. So, and it would be nice to have a couple more, but parents are, they're still scared. The numbers here were high and they continue to be so. So we have to be patient, I guess.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Dolores. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Something that just occurred to me, and I can imagine there's a bunch of reasons why somebody wouldn't want to share this, but if there's anybody that had to deal with COVID occurrence or a risk or a scare, and you've had to have those conversations and send those emails, I'd love to hear from you and just talk about what you said, how parents responded, any best practices or tips and tricks you have. Feel free to just pipe up or drop it into chat. Revisiting our chat, Vivian mentioned that St. Catherine's Montessori out of Houston, Texas has face shields with glasses. And I'm not sure I know what that means. Vivian, you mean well, maybe you can explain it actually if you're.
So it's the face shield. You see some that have a band around it that's a big foam piece on your forehead and it says face shield across the top. This has plastic glasses with no glasses inside, just the top frame that fit right over your glasses. So if you're wearing a mask, it helps hold the mask. It doesn't fog up, but it allows, it's, this tall. And I'll send a link through Amazon on the chat. And that way the guide can have her mouth or his mouth fully visible to the students and they can see that, but then they're very well protected. And so I had a great chance to be in a classroom last week because a teacher was absent and I used it the whole time and it was very helpful and it did not fog up. And then you could spray it and sanitize it, but it was really very helpful. I'll go find the link and send it.
Thank you. That'd be really helpful. And any resources anybody has, if you have something where you're like, oh my goodness, something as mild as, whenever we're cleaning, these gloves are easier to take on and off, that type of pro tip, something that makes people's life just a little bit easier. We'd love to have those learning lessons. So please share those and we'll make sure to make them available. We're getting some feedback on the distance learning. Jan mentioned that she's not doing any distance learning. Robin said they're on-site learning only, ended distance learning in June. That's great to know. So you had distance learning, Robin, and then you discontinued. I'd love to know more about that if you don't mind sharing.
So yeah, we went into distant learning, of course, in April, but in California we were allowed to reopen in June, and some families weren't yet ready to continue or to come on site. So we gave them the option for the remainder of the school year in June to continue distant learning or to be on site.
Okay, so there was like a natural line of demarcation.
Yeah, and then we ended the distant learning at the end of the school year, but July and August is summer school. So we just have been on site with one classroom, no more than, we wouldn't take more than 12 kids, but enrollment's been about 10 in the one classroom, which is typical for summer for us. But as we progress into the new school year after Labor Day, then we will be taking, having 2 pre-primary classrooms of 12 kids each. We did have to split it up, which I didn't like. Goes against the Montessori in me, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I had to divide it by age so that I didn't have to buy twice the materials that will only get used for 1 year.
What a good note. That's very practical. Thank you for that, Robin. Grateful to you. Stephanie, who's in Georgia, mentioned that she has a toddler in primary only, no distance learning. Heidi said we're doing blended, which is on and off campus learning simultaneously, which is really, really hard. Also in Illinois, parents are on both sides of the fence on mask wearing. Heidi, if you would like to, I'd love to hear more about some of the struggles with blended and any advice you have for others.
Oh my gosh. Well, we kind of spent the summer thinking this is possible, we can do this. And then the rubber hit the road and we were like, wow. Because you've got teachers in the classroom, but they're simultaneously trying to pay attention to the students offsite. So the only way it's really worked is in our upper elementary, where it turned out that we had one teacher who did not want to come back. And so we said, great, you're in charge of off-campus. So she's basically working part-time as a dedicated off-campus teacher. And that's what she does. And that's where her focus is. And then we've got 2 teachers who are there in the in-class dealing with the in-person. We tried to do something similar with the lower elementary, but we didn't have a dedicated teacher. And it's a real struggle. We've got it down to, I opted for quality time over quantity time. And so we have 7 kids who are offline right now. Or I keep saying offline, off campus. And we've got them down to like 10 minutes a piece, but it's like quality 10 minutes a piece. It is one-on-one time with your teacher, 10 minutes. But parents are having a tough time with this. My kid only gets 10 minutes and I'm paying full tuition. And then there's a whole like adapting Montessori materials for remote learning. You're missing the materials, turning things into worksheets. We're used to giving people free range, but now we have to provide them with much more guided. I don't know if anyone's using Google Classroom. It's a great thing because it's organized a lot of information together in one place, but it's not a Montessori tool. And so you have to kind of translate from Montessori curriculum into the Google Classroom. So it is working for upper because they had the experience in the spring. We thought, we did this in the spring, we can do it again. But the spring was 100% attention on 100% of the class, all remote. And the blended has been just a new level of challenge that we were not expecting. So if anyone has done blended and done it well, I'm all ears. We're looking for, how do we make this better? How do we match the effort it costs us with the value that the parents perceive?
Out of curiosity, if somebody is dedicated, so you mentioned you had your elementary guide who's now dedicated remote. Mm-hmm. How many students is that person capable of teaching?
How many is she capable of? I don't know. Right now, she only has 5.
Okay.
Right. But here's the thing. We have, so we asked people to sign up. Are you going to be on campus or are you going to be off campus? If Illinois goes back to phase 3 and schools around us close, do you want to stay on under this emergency daycare provision, or do you want to go off? So we have like a first tier of people who chose off campus, and then we have a second tier of people who will be off campus if we go to phase 3. And then we have quarantine. People who we just had this now where we've got a kid who, it's not them, it's someone, networked through the family, and they need to be out for 10 days. What are you going to do with that kid? So I certainly don't want them to lose 10 days of school. So it's, we've had to be responsive to like switching kids in and out. We had another strange case with, they want to see their grandparents, so they're not going to be in person for, a certain time so they can see. So we tried to kind of like, you're either on or you're off. And it's turned out that we just need to have this kind of flow, but it is so challenging to try to make that work. And so, I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence right now about, do we offer this or do we just say, I'm so sorry, we can't do it. We'll hold your spot. Let's try to find people who do want to be on campus. It's really tough.
Yeah, it sounds like it. There's a lot of
Heidi, this is Wally again. I just was, we were thinking about this changing students from in-person to distance learning, depending on the time frame and all that. Our teachers point blank don't want that.
I understand why.
They say it's highly disruptive.
I understand.
And then so they just, they put their foot down that they will not accept that.
Well, and I know there is a school of thought, which I respect, which says it's not the same thing. Don't even try to offer it. But I also have a feeling like this is where the kids are at. And if this is the only way we have to reach them, then we should try. And I don't want to give up. I had to fight for our EC off-campus program, which we're running as a pilot with only 3 students. And I'm still fighting for it because otherwise all we have to say is good luck with your kid. Don't let them watch too much TV. See you next year. We just give up, right? So I'm like, we got to try it. We got to try something. It may not be pretty, may not be worth the full tuition, but we got to try.
When you said something, Heidi, that I think is so important to just highlight, which is quality over quantity. That's a really good pro tip for anybody else who's in a position where they have to provide some level of remote programming. What you just said, I think you have to take the pressure off yourself a little bit and say, this is what we can do well. And so we're going to do that well.
Yeah. The challenge is that it's easy to think quantity and it's hard to think quality. And it's also the parents find it easy to think quality and hard to think quantity. So they're two, you have to get your staff on board with this. You also have to educate your parents, right? Because everyone's like, well, just add more time. And it's like more time on Zoom is not a good thing. That's going to backfire really fast. Because, like you're watching somebody else do something passively. And so I said, if the kids are going to be passive, they shouldn't be on Zoom. They should only be on when they are interacting, but that now we're down to 10 minutes and we got parents going like, my kid's only getting 10 minutes, so it's this is really hard and it involves re-educating. And we're still stuck in that idea that education is teacher says, student hears, right? And we're trying to get everybody beyond that and into like, no, that it's the work in between. And then when you're with the teacher, you're checking in with, you're solving problems, you're asking questions, not this is where you receive information. You know what I mean? But that's a paradigm shift for a lot of parents. That's really hard to get across.
I don't remember if you shared, Heidi, already. Will you share the size of the school?
We could go up to probably 250. We've been running at like 150, 160. We're now close to like 125. Our toddler infant EC program is really hurting, but our elementary is full to bursting with the wait list because the schools around us have gone remote, 100%. The public schools are 100% remote and everybody hates it. So but that's also a new challenge, right? Is taking in a lot of students who have never had Montessori before, families who have never really absorbed Montessori philosophy. And so now you've got these full classes with non-Montessori kids, plus you're running blended. So you get teachers with gray hair.
That's hard.
Losing hair.
Heidi, thank you for sharing
All
that.
right, I'm sorry, it took up too much time, but
No, that was, I
it's
thought
something
it was valuable.
I'm passionate about. My own kids are doing the off-campus elementary program, so I have a vested interest in getting this right.
Absolutely. I'm revisiting our chat because it's blowing up here a little bit. Janice mentioned that they're in Northern Virginia, currently have about 75 students, toddler through elementary. Everybody with toddlers are wearing masks all the time. They started running the second week of August after running a shortened summer program. And the elementary class has an outdoor classroom, which they're utilizing. And it sounds like everybody's trying to go outside as much as possible, where feasible. And I don't know that I'll read all the school and class sizes, if y'all don't mind, just because I want to be respectful of everybody's time and you can see them in chats.
Hassan, can I say a little word about, this is Jan,
Hi, Jan.
about our outdoor classroom?
Yes, ma'am, please.
So it started out being a garden project, which the elementary teacher and some of the parents and kids worked on over the summer. And it really has developed into truly a classroom. The kids are out there, unless it is raining outside, that is their classroom. It's not just, we're outside as much as we can. Well, we are outside as much as we can, but their classroom really is the classroom outdoors. We've moved materials outside. They have a running water sink outside for hand washing. They have literally everything they had inside, outside at this point. We have big, the open air tents that they have shade, although the space has a lot of natural shade also. And it really is something to see. It's something to, these kids have not spent a lot of time in nature. And that's clear because they spent the first week being fascinated by every bug they found. It was just like, you've never seen bugs before kind of thing. And it just, it really is great. So I want to encourage people that have the space, that have the willingness on the part of the teacher to think about things like that. I'm not sure it would work for the little ones, but we have a 6 to 12 class and it's working for our kids. They still wear masks even when they're outside. We still distance even when we're outside. So we're playing it as safe as we can play it. But it is a wonderful experience.
Thank you for sharing that, man. Great.
Yeah.
Vivian, you mentioned that you're doing a hybrid model as well, and it sounds like you're having families stick with the choice that they've made.
Right. So we basically give them 3 options. So the infant community through primary is in person, except if you've chosen remote choice, which you can return on September 8th when the elementary through high school kids return on campus, or you can choose to stay until October 2nd, when we will ask again if you want to stay again for another 7 weeks. Right, right. So we chose to have our elementary through high school distance learning through Labor Day because it just was, our teachers were really not very secure in being on campus the first number of weeks. And so we opted to have all of elementary through high school distance, which is working beautifully. They're in school 8:30 to 3:30 every day. And it's much more structured than normal. There's times that we do things, times that they've got, rest or PE or lunch, etc. But our primary, I was just actually writing in the chat right now, we've got 250 kids and about 88 have chosen this remote choice learning. So we're making phone calls to all those people next week to find out if they want to continue September 8th on, or if they want to come in person and give up the remote learning. However, if you've chosen to be remote from September 8th through October 2nd, you have to stay. Whatever you've chosen in terms of coming back to school, you need to actually, let me say this again. If you've chosen remote, you need to stay remote through the next deadline, which would be October 2nd. But you can actually leave the class because of certain reasons, right? If somebody has you can always leave, but we're asking families to stay out if they've chosen to stay out.
That makes sense. You can always move into remote, but you can't move into class.
You can't. This is not like whatever you want, and it's not a free for all because that sort of that blended where you can do it's very hard for the guides because they knowing who's in the remote and who's in person really helps them stick with what the program is, and that was the way we were able to make that happen for them. So we're really very lucky. Yeah, that's it.
That's helpful. Thank you, Vivian. Roseanne in Phoenix has some questions if anybody wants to chime in. She's asking, are students bringing lunch boxes or paper bags? Are schools reducing their hours of operation? And what size cohorts are in place? And if you have answers that you want to offer up here or in chat, please feel free to chime in. Another question from someone in the group is asking if anybody wants to share their plans for reopening for any schools that haven't opened yet, but they plan on opening. If you have anything that you'd like to voice and share, we'd all be interested in hearing it. Jan mentioned a new air purifier that she dropped in a chat that might be worth looking at for anybody who is still looking for materials like that. Oh, wow. Diane has a story. Diane, would you mind sharing this? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Okay, so in New York, there's kind of been some things going on with the CDC says one thing, the New York State Health Department says another. Our local health department says something different. We're also licensed under Office of Child and Family Services, and they all have these different rules. So we had two things. We had a child vomited on a Saturday morning, and our policy has been that they need to stay home until they've been tested or cleared by the doctor to come back as, you know, not having COVID. Then we had a staff member who was here and also vomited once and had no other symptoms, you know, was fine the next day, but I was kind of on the cautious side, and both tests came back negative, but I called our local health department. They didn't say anything about staying home until the test came back negative. They said you're essential workers. They can come back after 24 hours of you know, not having symptoms. I did have the staff member stay home because that was the policy that we had presented to our parents in the beginning. And it did come back negative, but it took like 6 days to get that test back. And everybody was fine, but we ended up not telling our families because there was no positive case, which we would have, you know, shared that if it had come down to that. But this is our 10th week of summer camp, and we've had no issues. We're cleaning all the time. Parents are dropping off and picking up outside. We have a very, very small group of children. I think maybe like 14 total, toddler and primary. A lot of our parents are just not ready to send their children back. So we're running a very small number, but it's kind of a good, I think somebody else mentioned being like a test, kind of like test case, see how things go before you have the bigger group. We open September 8th. So, you know, other people have shared it's good to have a contact in the health department, someone that you know you can get a hold of like right away when something happens, so that you know if you have a staff member that's sick, what you need to do, because the rules seem to be constantly changing. And I want to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And it varies from state to state as well.
Yeah, having a plan for when things go wrong, I think, is critically important because it helps take the stress off. It's going to be a abysmal situation regardless, but at least, I mean, have the email written, you know, just have that ready, because otherwise having to deal with that end of the situation, I think, could be really difficult. Thank you for sharing that, Diane.
And I got all that from Matt, by the way, from one of his things that, you know, one of the webinars that he did, the meetings that he did. So I already had the local health department. I already had the New York State Health Department, just in case we were ready to go.
Good.
Thank you for that. And all those calls are still recorded and live on the site if anybody wants to revisit.
It's been a fantastic resource. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Well, and we appreciate y'all showing up week after week. This has been amazing. Liza, is that you raising your hand? Okay, sorry. Robin mentioned loving the idea of an outdoor classroom. Sounds like Jennifer has one too. Kathleen has a question for Vivian. Have you been affected by the hurricane? And just thoughts and prayers your way.
Thank you. I will say that luckily, I mean, I think Dolores will say this also, we missed it completely. It completely just went, unfortunately, to Louisiana and hit them pretty hard. So unfortunately, they were super affected, but we had nothing. I had sunshine yesterday and sunshine today. We, of course, had to make the very hard decision to close schools because you just don't know with these Gulf hurricanes, and the Floridians know the same thing. You just never know what they're going to do and what direction they're going to go. So we made the very hard decision at the very last minute at 5 o'clock on Tuesday to close for 2 days. And I know that people are going grumble, grumble, grumble. Why did you close? But, you know, we had to keep our families as well as our staff safe, right? Because we have many staff members living in low-lying areas. And so we just closed. So, but we're sunshine.
Good.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Just out of curiosity, one of the things that we were thinking about doing at Nido is possibly having technology lessons for parents. So Montessori schools could allow their parents to register for, you know, a lesson on how to use Zoom, just for instance, how to get your child set up, how it works, things to be aware of. Would that be helpful? Is that a resource that people would avail, or is that, it sounds like the distance learning thing is sort of a little finicky at the moment. And I imagine a lot of parents kind of already been forced into a situation of figuring it out. So feel free to chat in if you think that would be helpful. And then I'm also interested in any other resources that we could create as you're going through this. If you can think to yourself, gosh, it'd be great if I had X, let me know, and we'll see if we can't pull something like that together. Heidi mentioned there's a lot of really good lessons on YouTube for Google Classroom, Zoom, communication templates, etc., which is a really good point. We're actually having a hard time finding someone to come in and teach us about Google Classroom from a Montessori perspective. So that's been something we've still been hunting down. If anybody has anybody that you want to volunteer up, please let me know. I'm going to move into our conversation starters. Is that okay? And I'll start lobbing questions across the fence. And if anybody has anything that they want to add, please let me know. Let me actually drop these all into chat so we can just be prepared for them. The very first question is, what modifications have you made to your physical environment? I know Matt put up shields, which I think he ended up later saying that they weren't quite as effective as he hoped they had been, but that was a pretty big change. And then of course, spacing out his classrooms. But has anybody else done anything significant that they'd want to share that's been really helpful? Jan?
Yeah, we have shields up in the elementary classroom, up the inside elementary classroom. We don't have them outside, and they're fine. I think they serve their purpose. It's just one more barrier, and you hate to see it, but whatever. We also went ahead and did the UV lights in the handlers of our HVAC system. So the air is getting cleaned one more time. And we were lucky because our building was a class 5 building, which meant that it already was an upgrade of regular HVAC systems. It was built for a school, not our school, but it was built for a school before us. And so they had to put all that in. So all of our classrooms have individual heating and air conditioning controls. We also have the advantage of great big windows, and those windows are open as much as we can open them. I think the differences to the HVAC systems were the most that we really the biggest things we've done.
Out of curiosity, how much of that did you share with parents?
All of it. All of it. I mean, that's the kind of thing they want to know. They're looking for, I think they're looking for, what have you done? Is my child going to be safe there? How do I know that? What policies have you put in place? What other changes have you made to the building, or safety things have you taken into place? That allows them to then, make their decision. I just think communication is important all the time, but I think they're really looking for, tell me everything you've done. Tell me how you're going to handle X, Y, and Z. And you just have to be willing to answer those questions.
The secret is tell me, because they don't want to read.
Well, I don't know.
I have it in writing just for safety purposes, but I know what you're saying, Jan.
Well,
Absolutely.
I'm going to disagree a little bit. I normally would agree with that, but I think that we feel that they really did read the information we put out there in our handbook before school started. Everybody got on board pretty quickly. When the parents come to school in the morning and drop off the kids, they have to have face masks on too. We're not asking them to get out of the car, but everybody wears a face mask, no matter where they are on campus. And everybody did it. Everybody did it. So I just, maybe they were frightened enough to really want to know whatever it was, but I feel like they really did, in this case, pay attention. So.
Well, I'm sure everybody's already done this, but I wouldn't mind spending some time on the fact that it's really worth self-advocating. You're investing a lot of time and you're investing a lot of money in this infrastructure, and it's worth letting parents know as bullet pointed list.
Yeah.
If you haven't opened yet, make sure that gets sent out. If you've already opened, you can remind parents, these are all of the things that we're doing. And then the evil marketer in me says that there's nothing wrong with a little showmanship. So if those lights that you're using to clean things happen to be out on the counter when they walk in, and I'm, only being moderately hyperbolic, but it's okay for people to see some of the changes that have taken place, because I think that helps drive home some of that messaging.
I don't know if I can share something. What we did is after we send the handbook, the protocol handbook, we did a Zoom meeting with all the parents and kind of we did a PowerPoint explaining everything that will look different, so that they could also tell their children before they actually came back, as well as answer any questions that they may have, or just so that, you know, we can kind of get together and also ask them if they had any ideas to share, and that went quite well. So it worked for us.
That's great. I love the idea, Dolores, of showing them the changes that they're going to see before they get to the classroom. That preface that's really brilliant.
We had the children come by one morning in their car so that we could let them know what it was going to be like to have their temperature taken. So that was also, we felt not to get out, but you know, here's what it's going to be like next week when you start.
Oh, that's smart. And Vivian, on that note, actually dropped in her answer to what routines have we changed. And so she had some arrival notes, the verbal questions they walk through, the temperature checks of children. That's worth taking a look at. It's in chat. And if you're watching the recording, we always have the chat available to download underneath the video. Vivian, I interrupted you, sorry.
No, that's okay. We also did a very short video with, it's really lovely. Anyway, but it shows one of our teachers whose son is a student at the school going through the carpool line in the morning, and me asking the adult questions, and then going to the child and saying, I'm going to take your temperature. And there's no words, right? It just shows me physically, with that gun in my hand, but it shows the whole routine, so they knew exactly what was going to happen. The parents weren't afraid, the kids weren't afraid, and it's been beautiful. We have the families at one end of the carpool sort of circle drive, and they do a temperature check there, and then we drop the kids off, no touching, etc. And it's been very smooth, and it's worked well.
That's awesome. Thank you, Vivian, for that. If anybody else has any other routines or anything they've changed that they want to share, please let us know. Jan's asking if anybody's using an app for morning screening. If so, which one? Matt was using an app that came with his thermometer. I guess that it's HIPAA compliant and it's part of what you purchase. And he shared it on his video. If anybody remembers offhand what that was, because I think a few people bought it. Heidi mentioned. Oh, go ahead, please, Wally.
We are using an app called Pick My Kid, which has integrated itself in terms of all the questionnaires, the question that we need to ask. And many of the schools are using, I'm not sure it's nationally available or not, but it has worked fairly well for us.
I just dropped that into chat, Wally. Thank you for anybody who's interested. And I think it is available nationally, because you mentioned this once before and I looked into it.
Yeah, there's one challenge that we are having, and I want to share that with you guys and see if you are basically experiencing the same issue. We have in our for the app, we have about 10 questions. No, I think 3 main questions that we ask. One is the temperature, of course, and then there are about 10 symptoms that CDC recommends about fever, diarrhea, chill, and all this kind of stuff. And then if the third question is, have you or anybody in the household been exposed to COVID? These are 3 basic questions we ask. Now, the pushback that we're getting from the parents is that if a child has, let's say, a cough, or let's say has runny nose, well, I mean, based on if you want to be strict about it, the child cannot come to school that day. And so what the pushback is, oh, well, my child has allergy, or he just took for example, the vaccine, so he's having fever. And we had a meeting with the Department of Health here to figure out, we don't want to be in a position where we can say, well, okay, if 2 out of 3 are bad, then keep it. Otherwise, I mean, that's not something that we can do. It's either it has to be black and white. So the Department of Health suggested that we go strictly with even one item basically is there. The child should not be coming to school for 48 hours till the symptom cleared, or get a certification from the pediatrician that they are fine, there's no COVID issues, they can come to school per se. So that's a challenge where we have been, I mean, we have had pushbacks from parents and we've been always wondering what is the right way to do it, but we didn't want to individuals, teachers to start making judgments. Okay, you have runny nose, but it's not too bad. Or maybe you have cold, it's okay. You can come and all that, because then it opens up a whole Pandora's box.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really difficult decision to make. Has anybody else dealt with that? Melissa?
Yeah, so that question actually came up today. We just this week we started bringing all of the staff back to prepare. We start school on September 8th, and today we were talking about specifically what happens when the parent just, you know, checks everything on the form, but then the child shows up and clearly there's something going on. How do we turn the child away? And my position on it is that, like, you have to turn the child away. This is such a precarious situation, and maybe I'm being a little bit of an alarmist here, but I feel that, like, at any moment this whole operation could shut down, and so we have to protect this for all the students and all the staff. So allowing one student to come in who is maybe it's just allergies, or maybe they, I don't know, had a vaccine and so they have symptoms, I think, like, in my position, I feel that it's too much, and it could close down the whole school. So I would rather say no to the one person to protect the whole community than to say, well, okay, let's bring this child in. But one of the questions that the teacher says, well, how do we tell them that their child has to go? Like, how do we turn away the child? I don't know if anybody has had that experience yet, but how do we turn away a child?
Has anybody had to do that?
I mean, once they're in school or basically during the carpool?
I think I would be helpful. Oh, he was asking in school or in the carpool line?
Well, in the carpool line.
In the carpool, we just say, sorry, you can't, you just have to turn back and leave. I mean, you cannot be at the school. And we have done that a few times. But once they're in the school, and then if the staff basically identifies certain symptoms, we just call them that the child has to be picked up in 30 minutes.
So Wally, we had that issue with, you know, taking temperature and oh, well, your child's temperature is really high. Our thermometers show, you know, red, that the temperature is too high. Well, of course, we're in Texas and it is 90+ degrees at 8:30 in the morning. So we invite the family to turn around the corner of the parking lot, sit in the shade for a little bit, let the child sort of cool off. And then when the rest of the carpool is gone, we ask them to come under the awning where it's a little shaded. We wait a few minutes and then we take the temperature again. And 100% of the time it is normal and the temperature's on. But we you know, so we don't send them away sort of right offhanded. We just sort of say, well, it's just a little bit high, a couple of whatever. And so we've done that. But I will say, if a child you cannot have a child in school, and parents have to understand that. If the child is truly sick, and that's just too dangerous for everybody, in my opinion.
That's a good point, Vivian. But we have an opposite problem in a sense that when we take the children when they're in the car, I mean, before they get out of the car, and usually what is happening is that the air conditioning is blasting on their face. So the temperature normally shows cooler than what it normally should be. So we have the opposite problem there, that we make sure that we don't, I mean, we make sure that if the air conditioning is right on that, you just visualize a van, right? You have air conditioning vent right on top, and the child is sitting right there. So that's an opposite problem that we have. So you're right. I mean, sometimes you have to maybe get them out and take a temperature elsewhere. Sometimes what we suggest is also, rather than taking the temperature on your forehead, we say try to take it on the wrist. Usually there's about a 0.1 or 0.2 degree difference between the two. So that maybe you get a better temperature on the wrist than you can make it on the forehead when you're taking the car.
One comment on Melissa's question as far as having the tough conversation of sending a child home. I don't have any good answers, but I do think that it would be really helpful to establish the protocol prior to. So if you have the email that you're sending out to parents saying these are the things that we're doing, in that email, make sure it says, and according to the CDC guidelines or whatever health organization we're following, one of these is a prerequisite for us sending the child home, and we just want you to know that. And then if you had that documented, so that the guide or somebody's out there with a clipboard and they've got the little checkbox, if you can have that at the top of the page, it's easier to make the paper the bad guy, because then you can look at it and say, I'm so sorry, and you're pointing at this thing that you obviously didn't print out while they were there. So now you're not picking on them. You have something that can back it up. Still a really tough situation, but I think those two tools could be helpful.
Kasim, I think we did exactly that. I mean, we had after the Department of Health meeting, we basically went ahead and sent an email listing exactly that, what you just said, and also attaching our updated pandemic operations manual with it. So that is documentation, and also 2 or 3 bullet items that basically came out of our meeting, so the parents know.
That's really helpful, Wally. Thank you. Heidi mentioned a really good point, which is some parents are going to start complaining if they're paying full tuition and their child's missing 10 to 14 days of school. So I think that's a rule that needs to be outlined early too. Just whatever you decide to do there, make sure that it's written somewhere.
We just had that experience yesterday. I mean, one parent, basically, my child was off for 2 weeks, and because her mother was positive, and then they were asking, well, can I get proration of the tuition? And the mistake we made is, I mean, luckily we had escape, because we said in our parental agreement that if the child misses the school for any reason, for a few days, there'll be no proration of tuition. It's right there spelled out. And we should have said that also in the pandemic agreement that we have in addition to that, but we didn't quite do that explicitly there. It should have been in both places. But yeah, you have to have in the agreement form saying that, otherwise children are, I mean, basically parents are going to come back and say, can I have my tuition refund? Or they will say, well, can my child have distance learning because he's not able to come to school? Yeah. Now that is impossible, because you cannot have distance learning dedicated to a specific child, and we do not want him to be plopped into the current classes, because that's going to be very disruptive. So we said, sorry, it's not feasible for us to do that either.
So Melissa, did you have input there?
So I think to his point, I do want to say that was exactly why we are starting out with a blended learning program. Granted, the woman, and I forgot her name, who said that it was going terribly. And so now I'm like, I'm nervous, but we, since June, I have been preparing a blended learning program so that if a child we have to turn away or is sick or for whatever reason can still have the distance learning aspect of the school, so that the child is continuing to do the work. So in the blended learning program that I have, which is kind of what I'm wondering, how are you doing blended learning? Because the way I have done it is we split the class in half, and we have an AM and a PM cohorts, and then or bubbles, and then if you're in the PM, then in the AM you're expected to do the work, and then if you're an AM person, then in the PM you're still supposed to go home and do distance learning. So everybody is still doing distance learning, but we're just bringing the children in for half a day for 5 days a week, so that there's the instruction being given, there's that the community building, there's just relationships, right? Because one of the things that I was nervous, if we started out with distant learning, we're not building a community, whereas when we did distance learning in the spring, we already had that community built. So there was a lot of thought that went into this, and I'm really probably more nervous than I was before. But part of the distance learning program that we have put together is we have the Google Classroom, and I know you had mentioned, is there a Google Classroom that anyone thinks is going really well? Well, what I did was I threw every single lesson that I could onto Google Classroom, and then on Fridays we do a Friday dump, and on the Friday dump we're basically giving the parents what the lesson plans are for the week for their child. And so if it's not happening during the day at school, then it can happen, or even being repetitive, right? Because we know that if a child goes to do a lesson over and over again, it's helpful. They're learning, right? That's part of the learning process. So we did, so we've got the Google Classroom. We're also making materials. So wherever we can make materials, we've got materials being made for each child so that in the classroom they have their own individual materials. So it reduces the amount of cleaning that the teachers have to do. And then they can take it home and they can have their own little thing at home. But one concern that I had, we're living in Washington, D.C., all of our houses are really small. So they may not have a space to have a shelf for the child for all the materials. And so I also started then adopting Seesaw, which I don't love at all. And because I don't want children on screens more than they have to. But the reality of the situation is that I have parents that either don't have the space for all the materials, or they really don't have that kind of time to make sure that the children aren't destroying or playing with the materials and are actually doing the work. So then on Seesaw, there's a little bit more of that accountability. So there's, and then we have the YouTube. So there's like, anyways, I have like 6 or 7 different things that are happening to do the distance learning so that if a child does go home, they can just go immediately to distance learning. And then I'm practicing all of the distance learning habits while we're in person.
That's helpful, Melissa. Would you mind sharing the name of your school?
Waterfront Academy.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So we're at time. I don't mind these calls running long if we're getting value from them. I don't want anybody to feel pressured to stay. So if you need to leave, feel free to jump ship. I think I'm going to let the conversation continue to flow if y'all don't mind, because we're still getting some good stuff out of this. One thing that I wanted to mention, Claire referenced having a resource library for children who might need to go home for a few days. Melissa, it sounds like you have that too with Seesaw and maybe some of your YouTube channels. I think that's a great idea. On the NITO website, we have a ton of videos that Donna DeHusseler made, and they're downloadable and completely white label. And so if you need resources, they're free to use. And then she references a lot of awesome offsite links. And I think the Montessori Library, Camille, didn't they have a bunch of free stuff too? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
I don't think they're geared for children.
Okay.
They are, but they might be appropriate for parents. So if you, are trying to help a parent give a lesson or support a lesson that one of your teachers have given, then there might be something there. So it might be worth checking out for sure.
Okay. And Heidi made a really good point. Donna's videos are aimed at pre-K, so that those may or may not be ultra applicable depending on your needs. I have a horrible idea potentially, and I'm always afraid of stepping on pedagogy, but the entrepreneur in me wonders why we wouldn't try to find, maybe on a per time zone basis, get schools together, find the guides that had to stay home, and then that guide deals with everybody's distance learning. And so you could have 5 schools that are feeding distance learning. I'm seeing Heidi shake her head no. Is there a why to the no, Heidi? Sorry, you're muted. Just a bad idea.
Oh my God. No, I mean, I love your ideas, and there's an economy of scale to it, but Oliver, I can't even get three EC or primary classes to do the same thing. Montessori teachers come at this, it's an art, not a science, and they are on their own individual, and you just can't combine.
Mm.
We are not on any kind of uniform.
Yeah.
Also, I'm sorry, also the relationship you form with your students and the parents of those students. So because we have the children most likely for 3-year cycle, and so that would be tough, that would be yes difficult.
You're also putting us in competition with each other.
Sure. Well, and I've absolutely.
Right, because why are they going to sign up at my school when their teacher is actually somewhere else? Right?
Yes, ma'am. I'll stop coming with ideas from Montessori schools. Somebody's asking for the links to Donna's videos. I'm just going to share my screen real quick so you can see what I'm looking at. When you're on the NITO marketing site, you can come down here to COVID-19 resources. And then here's all of there's a ton of just really good downloadable content. And where did we put, oh, here we go. Montessori at Home videos, Montessori at Home video series. And so if you click on that icon, you'll see I won't even count them, but there's a ton of just really, really solid content. And what I like about it is Donna offered us additional context, links to resources that you can use, and then rough age application here. Here's 1 7 and up, 5 to 12, etc. So I hope this is helpful. You can link directly to YouTube, or if you'd rather own the media, which is maybe preferable, then you can always download the MP4 file, and then you can upload this to YouTube yourself, which I hope is helpful. And quite a bit happened in chat. Forgive me if I skipped over. I got lost there a little bit. Margot Hesterman. I feel really good. Don't forget, we're chatting with Tim Selden next week, and I think the topic there is going to be of critical importance. So looking forward to seeing you all there. If there's more that we need to do or other thought leaders you want us to go track down, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you to everyone who continues to show up. Really grateful to you. And we're going to see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.